Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the City Council's Finance Committee meeting of February 25th, 2009. This is a different time for us. We usually meet on Tuesdays at 5. This is Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. I'm going to ask the Finance Director to call the roll of the Finance Committee.
Councilor Dostal.
Here.
Councilor Murphy.
Here.
Councilor Narkowitz.
Here.
Councilor Raymond Labarge.
Here.
And Mayor Higgins.
Present. So we have really two items of business. One is that first is that we've had a request from the Literacy Center to rent the first floor of Memorial Hall at market rate for a short-term lease. And I think we'd have to RFP it, but I'd like to have the go-ahead to go out and see if we can get a renter for that space, and I know they're interested.
That sounds very good.
They ultimately want to be at the James House. The work is proceeding at the James House. In fact, we have Job Corps and the apprentices from the unions that are in there doing the work on it. The city's not paying again because we got a grant from the State Department of Labor to help us do this work in terms of covering the cost of the building. Not the work in the building, but cover the ongoing maintenance, et cetera, costs. And the group, the consortium, is busy fundraising to do the work of the physical labor in the building. And we've got a lot of donated labor. So in the interim, the literacy program is really interested in renting short-term for us. And of course, we have to go through the procurement process and so on. But I would like to ask Finance Committee in their capacity as Property Committee to authorize me to go ahead and explore leasing that space for up to, would probably be 9 months.
Are they in Sullivan Square?
That's the Center for New Americans.
Okay.
They're down on Brewster Court.
Brewster Court. Okay.
I would like to make a motion to allow the mayor to investigate the renting of the first floor of Memorial Hall.
Second.
So we would go out, they would have to pay full and fair market value for that space.
This is the old Council on Aging.
Correct. Right. And right now it's Janet Gary's in there, who's been the staff person on a grant for the consortium, the education consortium, working on James House. She's been being paid for by a grant. And she's down there, but nobody else is in there. We use it occasionally for meetings, but I don't think there'll be a big loss. We've had enough other meeting room. We don't use it for public meetings. It's been used for internal meetings. We've had a couple different meetings there, but really it's not very much used.
I think it's a great idea if we can get somebody to rent that.
I'd like to get
some bit of money.
I'd like to get some income in on that.
Yeah.
So
And ultimately, they'd move to James House once that is
That's
completed and
correct.
to a regular tenancy arrangement over there.
Right. Now, we have procurement issues to go through, so while we know we have this tenant, we have to figure out what the procurement issues would be. So, but if you'll authorize me to go ahead and put it out to bid, we'll figure out how exactly to do that, and then we come back with a lease for you to approve. Is that the motion? I don't
Yeah.
think that was exactly.
Been made.
Actually, it was to investigate renting the first.
Are you willing to, actually, I think it's to authorize me to go out to bid on
I'll
that.
add that to the motion.
Okay.
And to authorize.
That's friendly with these.
Okay. All right. I should have framed it a little bit better. Any further discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and I'll come back to you, I hope, very soon at one of your regular finance committees at the city council meeting to report back on you. So the main thing we're going to work on tonight, or focus on tonight, is the budget. And we've done a packet of all the slides, and unfortunately, I tried to get it to do the little place where you could write the notes on your little slides here, but if we did that, you would not have been able to read the numbers. So it's a pretty big packet, and Chris is going to hand it out to everybody. And then we'll go through it slide by slide.
And the extras just leave them on the end. Thank you.
So we're looking forward to fiscal year 2010. We are going to talk a little bit about fiscal year 2009 while we're doing this, but we're primarily going to focus on fiscal year 2010. But I first want to really set the backdrop, because this is also being televised for the public, to just explain some of where the money comes from that we have to spend and where the money goes that we spend before we jump into the problems that we have. So here's the first question: where does the money come from? The blue, which is our property taxes, excise taxes, personal property taxes, is the biggest chunk of the $72,000. The next biggest chunk is federal and state aid, and local receipts. Huh?
Million.
72 million, sorry, $72 million. So taxes are the biggest share, and federal and state aid, then local receipts, and the vast majority of those local receipts, quite frankly, are Smith Vocational. You know, in terms of the
Tuition.
size of their tuition, right. And then reserves and interfund transfers are that last little green slice. Okay, so property taxes, we're gonna look at it a different way. This is another way to look at it. Local taxes, at 99 paid about 50% of our budget. We're now almost up to 60% of the local taxes as a share of our budget, as our state aid has gone down. So the pink, appropriately, because it's the cherry sheet aid, is the pink aid, and that's gotten smaller. Then you can see the rest of the aid categories, and you know, most of them are very small. Most of our revenue sources are very, very small. There really are three big categories: local taxes, state aid, and charges for services. You should feel free to interrupt me with questions at any point. Councilor Dostal.
Would you explain interfund operating transfers, please?
Yeah, so what that is, sewer, water, and solid waste are run as a separate silo, in a separate business. They have to they have to break even on their own. We're not allowed to subsidize them, but we are allowed to charge them for the business services that we give them. So
That's
we do
enterprise.
payroll, we do their borrowing, we do their insurances, we pay for the benefits for anybody that's on the enterprise fund, and we're allowed to charge them for all of those, and those are audited by the auditor every year to make sure those charges are fair. Okay?
We also have some very other small ones, like the channel marker money and the waterways fund, funds that, and a couple of others that, when you look at your council order every spring for the upcoming fiscal year, you'll see like $4,500 being transferred from this and $4,500 from that, and that's in there as well.
So that is not the enterprise funds themselves, but
It's other special revenue funds.
fees to the city for our role in managing and
Right.
enterprise funds.
Would you
So when we say interfund, most of those come from the sewer, water, and solid waste, but there are some other small ones.
Would you say that it's better that 97% make up the enterprise funds? than the
Oh,
others?
I'd say that's pretty close, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So that's where the money's coming from. Just a note on state aid, this is net state aid. When you back out the state assessments, this is what we get net. So in FY 2002, we were at about $16 million, we're down to 16.5, we're down to 14.2, coming up in 2010. We have never made it back to our fiscal 2002 state aid number as a total of state aid. We are still below that number. And the next page shows you what happened with Chapter 70 aid, which is school aid. Now this is again net. We backed out the charter schools because that's this is the net state aid that's available for us to spend in our own schools.
Because the charter school comes right off the top.
Comes right off the top. We never see that money. So this is net to us. We get the $8 million number, but then they back out the $2 million number for charters, or $1.5 million or whatever it is.
1.3.
1.3, so they back that out. And then when we look at Chapter 70, it's a little confusing for Northampton because we have both our Northampton Public School Chapter 70 and the Smith Voc Chapter 70. They get reported in different places, but when we show them to you, we're showing them combined at this point. Okay? So that's the backdrop in terms of aid. That's very important to remember. We're still below where we were in 2002. I just want to remind people how Prop 2.5 works, and just look, if you look at the bottom here, the spreadsheet, and I hope it's clear on your thing, the bars won't be, but you start with the base levy, which is the green amount. Then you add the 2.5% increase from the previous year, 2.5 on the previous base levy, on the previous total. Then you add on the new growth, and then you finally add on the debt exclusions. And if you look at the debt exclusions, in FY07 we were at $1.5 million on debt exclusions. FY10 will be at $1.2 million. So each year they're going down a couple hundred to $300,000.
And the debt exclusions are the overrides for the fire station, JFK.
JFK and the high school.
Okay, those
So the way public debt works, that number, it goes up to a peak and then it starts declining. And we're in the declining years for all of those debt exclusions. So every year the tax rate's a little lower because those debts are going, that we're paying off that debt, yeah.
I noticed too that new growth is less than half of what it was, economically driven. That's less than half of what it was last year.
Yes, we're
Your
projecting,
estimate.
we're projecting that next year new growth is probably not going to be much more than about 300,000, just because things have slowed down. So
We're being very optimistic, I think, at the 300, quite frankly. I'm hopeful, I'm hoping we get the 300. This is just, this is the way the tax rate gets built every year. This is the way it happens, the way the budget gets built in terms of the local side. So where does the money go? Well, 73% goes to people. That includes all the salaries, all the overtime, all the benefits that go to our people, including health insurance, life insurance, all those kinds of things that are directly related to people. Okay? Ordinary maintenance, which is utilities, supplies, and also the cash capital and the debt service are in there, is about 26% of our budget. Other than ordinary maintenance is very small, and that's for some kind of one-time kinds of.
that's capital things like vehicles in the police department,
Very
and sewer things for the sanitary sewer system, stuff of that nature. Capital stuff
So,
is within their budgets.
so I think the powerful message on this slide is that for every dollar that we're spending, close to 3/4 of it is going to people. So for every cut we make, close to 3/4 of that cut is going to be people. Right? How's the money allocated? Lots of times people say, well, how much do you give to different departments? So we ran the number, backed out the fixed costs because the fixed costs are spread across everybody, and then just looked at, okay, how is the money allocated? Well, you can see that education, both Smith School and Northampton Public Schools are about 61%. Public safety is next at 19%, and then public works and general government both about 8%. Culture and recreation includes the libraries, and human services is primarily senior center, public health nurse,
Where does veterans fall in?
human services.
Human
Human
services.
services, okay.
And does public safety include police, fire, and the building commissioner?
And dispatch.
And dispatch?
And the building commissioner.
Building commissioner and the ambulance services,
And the
Right.
ambulance, okay.
Right.
and the dispatch center. No, public health is in human services.
Right, right. And these are the categories that state government uses to track, so we're just pulling the same categories that state government uses. Okay? Where do the people work? Again, it's kind of interesting to see that general government and public works, which are both about 8% of the budget, have about 6% of the employees. Human services about 1%. Public safety about 18%, and they had about 19% of the budget. Schools have the most people working for them, about 66%. And that makes some sense because there's a crew of people that are considered full-time year-round in schools, and then there's a crew, all the assistants are school year employees. So they have more of the sort of not full year people and sort of lower wage people, a number of lower wage people. People say, so what are these fixed costs? What are you counting as fixed costs? And this just gives you the list of things that are fixed costs. And health insurance is obviously the biggest amount that we're spending is on health insurance, and then debt service. Retirement, remember, we get the number from the actuary every year. This is what you have to spend on retirement. So that's not a number we can negotiate. The state is requiring us to pay to fully fund our retirement system by 2028. And we get a number each year that says, if you want to be on track, here's your number. Now this year we're using a number based on last year's investments. No, 2 years ago's investments.
Actually, we got an actuarial study for the period ended December of 2008.
8, right.
And that is good for 2 years. So fortunately, we missed the total collapse of the financial system in our last actuarial study.
But the next study will have to up the amount that goes to retirement because of the collapse.
For sure.
Basically, and there's been a lot of discussion on the state level about allowing cities and towns to stretch it out because of that.
They have not stretched out the fully funding of the portion of
The only
28, you said?
2028 is when we have to be fully funded.
Yeah.
The only thing I've seen at the state level is a proposal from PARAC that would allow municipalities to pay the same amount as FY09 for FY10, and then in FY11, 5% less than what it was, or 5% more than.
Kind of catch yourself.
They catch it, and they make you, but you still have to be on the same schedule. So it just means that in 2 years, you're gonna have to put more money in than you would have had to if you stayed on your own schedule.
So without stretching
It
it
has
out,
to
it
stretch
doesn't
the
really
years
make sense for us to take any of these other.
Right, you're just delaying the
flavors,
inevitable.
I think. The rest of them are pretty self-explanatory. I just want to explain, other benefits includes things like sick leave, buyback, and those kinds of things.
Taxes, payroll taxes.
What are the
Payroll taxes
offset-
there,
payroll
sorry.
taxes are Medicare.
What are offset receipts?
Offset receipts are.
Those are, the state sends us money for school lunch programs and libraries that we have to show as revenue coming in, but it's not revenue for the city. It goes directly over to either the school lunch or over to the libraries. So we put it in and we take it out, and that's
So we
what.
can't show it up above.
I have to show it coming in, I also have to show it going out.
The other thing is the abatement reserve. We're required to keep a certain amount of money in for the assessor's abatements, and that's about $400,000, yeah,
The new growth is dropping every year.
every year. Sign of the times.
Huh?
It's a sign of the times,
Yeah.
yeah. One other thing, it says at the top, other amounts to be raised. That's a very small amount of money. It was $31,000 this year, and it went to two things. One is our share of the assessment for the lockup at the county, at the jail, and we pay $1 a head for the use of the lockup. And it's definitely a savings for us to pay that $1 a head instead of having to hire lots of cell attendants and the other things we would have to hire if we didn't pay the $1 a head. And the other is the $5,000 for the bus, for the additional bus that we were assessed by PDTA. Okay, any other questions on this page? Ready to go?
You stated that you keep $400,000,
In the abatement
for the
reserve?
assessors
Right.
rebate. How much of that 400,000 do they actually spend each year?
It depends on the year, usually in the 370 range, but we need to set aside enough, even if they don't dole them out, we need to set aside enough to cover all the outstanding receivables that we may have, because those people could still come back and request an abatement. So we have to cover ourselves as the years go by until we get to a point where we can write it off and bring it back into the general fund. Next year, I would caution everybody, next year is a reval year.
So we're gonna,
That 400,000 is probably gonna have to get bumped to 475 or thereabouts, just because it is a reval year. And
Is there a state formula that you go by to?
It's
in terms of how much
historical.
you keep in there?
It's historical. We know off the bat, we know who our elderlies are and our, the people, we know most of the pool of the people that are gonna be applying for them. But we also have to keep aside some extra for people that might come in, new people that might come in that we just have. Councilor Murphy, you know this pretty good.
Yeah, but you can recapture, I mean, some of that comes back when free cash is certified once the year's over and the cycle's done, so.
We have done that.
You get back whatever's left.
Last year, we scooped up all the outstanding abatements and exemption, maybe the year before last, I guess it was. I scooped up about $400,000 of stuff going back to 2005, I
you
believe.
can't do it we don't do it every
I
year.
don't do it every year, though.
You can, if it's unused, you can
Right.
you can collect it back
Yes.
at some point.
Right, and it closes to fund balances, goes into free cash.
So if they spend 200,000 this year, for example, next year you just add another 200,000 to that, or do you add 400,000?
No, we're required by the state to maintain each of those buckets as its own separate bucket. That 200,000 stays in the 2009 bucket,
Okay, then
and 2010 has to have its own 400.
another 400.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It's not a rolling amount, it's a fixed amount.
Yeah.
Okay? People ask a lot about the debt, so I thought we'd just look at the debt a little bit before we roll into this year again. Where does the money go that we go out and we borrow? And as you can see, the vast majority of money that we're borrowing goes to schools. Most of that debt is override debt, you know, the JFK and the high school, but we still have I think at least a year left on Leeds and Bridge, and we're paying some debt service on that. And then we have a lot of debt, that's school debt, that includes roof at Smith Folk, boilers at Jackson Street, windows and doors at Jackson Street, Ryan Road, we did some improvements. So all of those are rolled into that school debt. So 71 cents out of it, every borrowed dollar that we spent really goes to the schools.
So those are capital improvement
Capital
projects
improvement
that-
dollars, right. The general fund debt this year is about $5.8 million. That doesn't include Chapter 90. So when you look at that DPW number, which is 4%, remember, we don't have the Chapter 90 in there, which is the money we primarily do with roads with. We don't have any sewer or water debt, which we use to somewhat assist in the road when a road is fully reconstructed. So we don't have any of that debt in there. If we did a full picture, we would include that, but they're in a different.
This is just general fund.
This is just the general
Tax
fund,
supported
yeah.
general fund.
But that does include debt exclusion override
Correct.
stuff. So
Right.
the big stuff that's in there as well, which is why it's so large. And
Right.
that's a declining thing.
And if you look at public safety is at 13% because we still are paying them for the fire station. Right. Libraries are at 4%. We have two relatively large library projects, and so they're at 4%.
Both Lily and Forbes.
Right, our show there, and Lily's on the downside of that first project, so that's why it's less than it was. Senior Center's at about 6%. And then open space, the other thing is that we don't really reflect CPA in here. In most of our open space, we buy from 3 sources. We buy very little out of the general fund. Now CPA, but before that, state grants and fundraise dollars and Conservation Commission fundraise receipts, etc. So you wouldn't see it in here because it's not general fund money. We don't generally buy land with general fund money, except for the tax title money that we've done.
But
That's probably the major one.
Yeah, that's cash capital though, that's
Right.
not borrowed
Right.
capital.
So it's very little conservation and open space with general fund money. Any questions on this?
Well,
Yeah.
just to go a little bit further, the biggest problem with the buying of open space with CPA dollars or otherwise is that those acreages that you buy, there are no longer the taxes coming into the city on it. And over the last 10 years, we've taken over 500 acres of land that we no longer get taxes paid on. So we have to be very careful in what we're doing.
I agree that is something we have to be cautious about. I've been supportive of buying land in the outer parts of the city.
And I have too.
Where development is more costly to the city, and we can get a reasonable price on the open space. That's the way I think, I mean, we bought 40% of the open space that we own has been bought during my time as mayor. So I've been a strong proponent of buying open space, but I want us to be cautious about how we buy it. I agree with that caution.
And I'd also say the $50,000 a year that we do from the capital plan for tax title properties, that's usually for properties that have no known owner.
Right, we're not getting
Cleaning the title up.
No one's paying the taxes.
No one's paying the taxes anyway.
And that money that we spend there comes right back into our budget anyway.
It actually costs us money to
Right.
track the fact that no one's paying the taxes, so.
My goal has been in the outer parts of the city, and I think the council's been supportive of this goal, when you can get a large tract of land that makes sense to keep, and I think of, for instance, Turkey Hill as a place that
Yeah.
comes to mind, but then coming closer to the city, the state hospital, which was not developed, let's develop that. Right? Let's try to look closer into the city, let's try to do that. And you agreed the other night to rezone that warehouse, or the factory down in Florence that was not being used to its highest and best use, which will result in a better cash flow in that building, therefore better value to the tax rolls. So, okay, ready for the next one?
Yes.
One other way to look at debt, again, look at the green at the bottom. That is the state's contribution to the schools. So you can see just about half of our debt is actually being paid for by state government, for JFK and the high school primarily, and a tiny little bit on Lee's and Grid. Okay?
So that 71% number that we saw in the last slide,
Half of it is coming in through
Through
the
state.
school buildings
That's correct.
fund.
School building assistance fund.
Right.
It's about $3 million a year from the school building assistance fund.
And then if you look at the pink one, which is the override for the high school, then the yellow is the fire station, and the blue is JFK, you can see that they're going down. And you can see the year we refinanced them too. because they were going down, and then in 2004, we refinanced that debt, and then it bumped
We
down.
financed one of them in 2004, we refinanced the other one in 2006.
Six. So you can see the change there, but ultimately, you can see as a share of the debt, they're going down because those overrides are going down, as you saw on the sheet where we did the tax rate. And then the general fund debt is staying relatively, it's going up a little bit because we've been focused on filling in with smaller projects to try to keep the debt level. But as that override goes down, actually we're not going to be able to fill all the way up to that 6,000. We're going to be down. Okay?
Well, things are gonna change.
Right.
The school building assistance money is gonna disappear.
Right.
But then so will the school debt service that the school building assistance money
The
is
whole
coming
thing
in
is going to
for.
reset.
This whole thing's gonna reset within about the next 5-10 years, as those two school projects are paid off.
And the
two
fire
major ones.
station.
And the fire station.
You're going to see that whole profile reset down.
The
So-
pink will disappear, the green will disappear, and we'll be left with the other things.
So this is the borrowed debt. I don't have the cash capital in here, but the debt remains at about 2.2% between cash and borrowed money, about 2.2% of the general fund. Yeah.
How much did our health insurance go up this year?
We're going to get to that, but it's about $1.8 million.
Right, an increase.
Right.
20%.
So here, now we're in 2010. So that's just sort of background. That's where we are, sort of status quo. And now we're going into 2010. What are our challenges? Well, our first challenge is that the state aid was cut by $530,000 this year, and this next year we're going to have a state aid cut of about $1.5 million.
Is that on top of the 530?
No,
No.
it goes up another. The cut goes up another million next year. If you want to put it that way, you could say they cut us $5 this year and $1 million next year, but in total $1.5 million.
Okay.
Excise tax revenue, as we said, has gone down by 7%. Interest income down. We talked to you about that before. Our negotiated increases in our contracts are up by about $1.2 million. Health insurance up 1.7 or $1.8 million. Other fixed costs, that includes computer licenses, utilities, the biggest component being utilities are up about $925,000. Both school and city, we're not approaching this as the schools have their own problem. This problem is everybody's problem. It's not school versus city. Okay, so we're approaching this collaboratively. And the free cash and the stabilization fund are down. Here's the spreadsheets that back up the numbers that I've just given you. Here's the revenue side, and so you see, remember earlier I showed you how the tax rate was, how the levy was growing? This year it's only going up about $1 million because we don't have the kind of new growth. Motor vehicle excise down. Smith vocational tuition, we're leaving this number in. They think they might be able to get 10 more students. If they get 10 more students, that's the number. But they could get no more students. I don't know, is Amherst going to send any students? They're going to probably try not to. So if they, what's that? Yeah.
Cutting out the transportation a little.
Yeah, cutting out the transportation. So, interest on investments really has tanked. You can see that number. This 5 college PVTA reimbursement, we think it'll go up. It might not go up that much. Medicaid reimbursement, we think will go down. It went down this year. And I think other school districts are having the same experience. And in fact, that may get zeroed out entirely. That is one of the things that's at risk on the federal level. So we're still trying to figure that out.
In fact, I think that's going to need to be revised, because I think that the last I heard, they were going to get rid of the administrative
That's the one that's
side of this entirely, so that would cost us a bunch of money too. I just haven't calculated that into this yet.
on the other side. Now, on the other
So
side,
on the Medicaid, so that means that our employees that are on Medicaid.
No, this is for students in the
Students in the
schools,
schools,
on the lunch program.
Got it, okay.
Medicare is on the health insurance
On the
side.
health insurance side,
Right.
sorry.
I have also a column there that says proposed. So local option meals tax, if the state gave it to us, it's a really downtime in the economy. Could we make $250,000 on a 1% meals tax? Maybe, but they haven't given us that authority yet, so it's not in the, we've got this money column, okay?
It is a pretty good likelihood, though, at least what I've been watching, that the discussion is leaning towards giving the cities and towns the option of coming up with a meals tax.
I was at a meeting with the Speaker of the House today, and he is you know, interested certainly in talking about all these things, but they're not committing yet.
No.
They're not gonna commit yet. And I think they've been thrown off that focus a little bit because of the gas tax discussion. So I think it's gonna make it harder for them to focus on cities and towns because they have a deadline to deal with the transportation issue by the end of March. So they're gonna be focusing on that and not necessarily on city and town issues till after that.
Well, that's certainly become a fiasco because the Turnpike Board raised turnpike fees and then they said if the gas tax comes in, we'll do away with that.
And the Speaker of the House happens to live in Winthrop, which is one of the places where the fees are astronomically high to get to, and you have to go through one of the tunnels to get there, so.
Wasn't the benefit from that local option meals tax about $100,000 higher than that at one point?
We had used a higher number, but I'm not comfortable using a higher number now. Not when I mean, I've been talking to restaurateurs in town, and they're telling me that both their number of people sitting in the restaurant is down, and the price on the ticket's down too. So you know, that's the most I'm comfortable. If we were to pass it at all, is that how much we could get? One-time funds we used a lot of our stabilization funds, and we'll come back to that later, but we used the $602,000 when you voted on the budget last year. You voted a transfer to fund the budget of $602,000 from the stabilization fund, one-time money. The schools used an equivalent amount in their budget, about $640,000, including $400,000 in prior year school choice. Smith College donation, that was a one-year donation of $100,000, and circuit breaker surplus. Now, that circuit breaker is the money that the schools get for special education, and they're allowed to use it for anything they want. It's a reimbursement because they've already spent the money on educating the student. But they don't have that kind of surplus going into this year. They spent it last year. Now here we're on the state aid, and this is per the governor of 12309. So first, charter school tuition reimbursement, we know we're going to get less than we got last year. There is some discussion about charter schools, and we'll see if something changes, but right now we're going with that number. Lottery plus additional assistance cut by about 30%. And the number that we got, our total in that category was $5.4 million. We're going to 3.9, so it's a little bit less than 1.5, but it's close. Yeah.
Are you doing your rainy day fund?
Well, we're going to get to that. We spent $602,000 of rainy day funds this year. So, veterans benefits, we are going to get some money back on the cherry sheet because our amount went up this past year, so we're going to get another $100,000 or so on veterans benefits. The state is talking about a statewide meals tax. They gave us a number that said we would get close to $500,000 back if the state did a 1% statewide meals tax. That means, based on the formula, so if people buy meals in Boston, we would get a share of that meals tax. I am really skeptical about that number. But it's in the proposed column, and we'll see if that passes. And then the hotel motel, they're also talking about going up 1%. There's been a lot of discussion, and the newspaper had a story about $1 million for Northampton in stimulus money, school stimulus money. I'm really going to be cautious about this money. Now, first off, $1 million was a 2-year number, not a 1-year number. It was actually FY2010 and into 11 because into 11. It's not 09, 010 anymore. It's 09 and 10 and 11 because the federal fiscal year doesn't align totally with our fiscal year. 115 or so is Title I. It's unclear whether or not you're allowed to use that to pay for things that you're going to cut. You know, you may need to use that for Title I eligible activities, which means that you add things with Title I money. The second is IDEA, which is special ed money. The federal government is woefully underfunded in their SPED allocation back to the states and cities and towns. But the regulation reads that you're only allowed to spend 50% of the increase in any given year for general kind of activities. The rest has to be devoted to special education activities. So it's not clear to me how much of this we can actually spend.
You're watching that pretty close.
Huh? Yeah,
Watch that.
Yeah. and I think, so under that 50% rule, maybe we could spend $200,000. But go back to the circuit breaker. On the state level, the governor's underfunding circuit breaker this year. So do we have to use some of that 200, we're gonna have to use some of that to help us with the circuit breaker cut. So it's staying in the proposed column until we have a better understanding of the money. Counselor Bardsley, have you heard anything different than what I just said?
I haven't even heard that much of it.
Okay. If anybody
It's
has,
still new. It's
yeah, and people are still,
sorting it out.
yeah, people are still figuring it out. And the other thing is there is some cops money, money to put police officers on the street. We understand that if you take it, you don't have to pay it back, but it's gonna go away in 2 years. So, 2 or 3 years. So we're gonna look at that really carefully, but, and then CDBG, we think there's gonna be some money there, but we don't have a number yet. Okay? Here's the expenses, I talked about these before, basically, right on the page where I told you what the problems were. Again, negotiated increases, coupled with ordinary maintenance increases like utilities and other things going up, and then the shared cost. And here we're back to the insurance, Councilor Labarge. The shared cost included a 20% increase in the health insurance. And we've met with the health insurance provider. We're going out to bid, but the 20% increase is based on the fact that we've filed a lot more claims this year. And they're spending a lot more money on our health, and they're increasing our rate.
Well, we have a relatively mature workforce, don't we?
Mature is a kind word, yes. We have a mature workforce. We have an older workforce, and we've had a lot of high claims this year.
And who are the companies? Have we decided who we're gonna send these out to, or?
We've begun reaching out to a number of companies, including the ones I think we reached out to last year, Tufts and Health New England. And I don't remember all of them, but we're going to reach out to a number.
Now, Health New England is really pushing to get it into this,
Right.
get a good foot into this market.
We're also looking at plan design, and whether or not changing the plan design makes sense. We've done a lot of work on plan design in cooperation with our unions, and that's helped us keep the cost down, but we may be running out of ways to change the plan too dramatically. Our plan is essentially the group insurance commission plan, but it's more expensive. Because it's not pooling with the big group insurance commission, so. Yeah.
We've been kind of ahead of that curve, but that time may be running out on that.
Yeah, one of our big problems is that our experience rating for this last year was at 98%, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah, 98%, which means that they're not making any money on us. And insurance companies don't like to not make any money on you.
So they,
That's gonna be our experience rating for other people that are looking to
Right.
bid on us as well.
98 cents out of every dollar that they spent went to healthcare. So there wasn't a lot in there for administration.
No junkets in there.
Right, no redecorating the big building, no, any of that. So it's a problem. And it will be as Chris says, we're gonna go out to bid, but. So if you take those shared costs and you look at how do you allocate those fairly, we are allocating them as 50% for the school department, 9% for Smith Folk, and 41% for school departments, school and city departments. If you look at how remember the pie chart that I showed you earlier, that about 61% of what we spend is school related, and about 66% of the people are school related. This seems like a fair allocation. It's 59% education related, and then the rest is general fund, or general government related. So it seemed to be a fair way to allocate it. I've had conversations with both superintendents and business managers, and there's general agreement that this approach they're comfortable with. So what is the gap? The gap is the loss of revenues about $2 million, coupled with the projected expenses of $4.1 million. We get to about a $6.1 million gap. And so that means the cuts that we need to make. City departments about $2.5 million, Smith Folk about $500,000, and the school department about $3 million. That is about a 12% cut from a level services budget next year. So remember, the budget that we're taking this off of is what happens if you fund everything that you need to fund, level services. We'd have to cut 12%. If we level funded people, we have to cut $2 million because we're $2 million short of where we were. Does that Make sense to people?
Yeah, but that's only theoretical because you have negotiated raises and you have other
Right.
things, so you can't just wave the magic wand and say,
Right.
we're gonna fund it at FY09 because you've got all those fixed numbers that are going up, so.
The fixed, all those numbers that are on the previous page, this page are real numbers. Now, we've asked everybody to take their pencil to the real numbers and say, okay, on the OM side, you know, what can you do and all that, but these are real numbers in terms of people's projected increases.
On that subject, I know this is happening in other communities, and I've been reading about it in the Globe. You know, discussions with employees about those increases and you know, discussions around one-year freezes and those kinds of things.
We're gonna talk about that.
Okay.
But again, you get back to an earlier slide, 73% of that 12% is people.
So going down, there was a question asked about, whoops, page up. Yeah, what's the gap? You were asked the question about, this is an important just data point for people. How much are people making? So when you talk about those people, how much do they really make? And I don't think anybody's making an astronomical sum of money. We backed out the mayor, superintendent, DPW director, police and fire chiefs from the senior management, and people are making on average $57,000. Administrative support staff, 39. You can look at the numbers, they're not astronomically high. The average city of Northampton pension, if you back out teachers because they have a separate pension system, is $17,000 a year. Now that includes all of our public safety people who have much better pensions, so that's a pretty low number, yeah.
Mayor, how come we don't have the pay scale for DPW director?
Well, you can have that, and that's, but I was looking for an average, and they would have skewed it because those numbers are high. Police, fire chief, even the DPW director only makes about $80,000, which, well, it's 170 road miles, and how many millions of dollars? 246, $8 million responsibility, approximately.
What we're trying to show here with these average salaries is because that's 73% of our costs, our personnel costs, how many people would you have to cut to meet the 12%, if you get our drift? And if you look at average teacher salaries of 47 or 54, how many teachers would it take to close a $2 million gap?
$3 million.
$3 million gap. So these are kind of from the perspective of what is the average cost we need to cut for how many bodies would we need to cut. And you know you're not going to be cutting out your police chief or your DPW chief because those people are still there.
So, and the other thing we put in was healthcare costs, and as you can see, on the Blue Cross, the Value Plus, the PPO, which we have a 50-50 share, it's a very expensive plan. It's a $29,000 a year plan. Fortunately, only 40 people are on it, and otherwise it would be. And by the way, state law requires us to offer two plans. We're not allowed to just offer an HMO. We have to offer some sort of indemnity plan, if you want to call it that. So we offer this PPO, which is cheaper than a full-fledged indemnity plan. And people pay 50-50 on that. We used to pay 60-40, we've moved to a 50-50 share. On the HMO Value Plus, we are at 80-20 on that. And the vast majority of our employees are on that plan. And we used to be at 90-10 on that plan. We moved to 80-20 in 2002 or 2003, as well as moving all of our retirees onto Medicare at that time. Yes, Counselor.
Following up Chris's comment about this giving us a framework to look at in terms of cuts and making up that money out of salaries. In the past, it was always the formula was put up there that for every 2 employees that you gone and lay off, you need to lay off a third to come up with benefits. Is that still true?
We're self-insured for unemployment, which means that we don't pay the unemployment premium. And if you took it over 20 years, we've saved money doing it that way. But in a layoff year, it's difficult because we have to pay the full unemployment benefit. So for every 2 people you lay off, in essence, you have to lay off a third.
So it's that
Right.
formula. So
Right.
The one place that we would be saving on is the employer share of the health insurance. Because when they lay the people off, yes, they can go on the COLA, but they have to pay 100% of the premium.
So for every person that we lay off, we are gonna have to pay their unemployment, but we're going to save, you know, 7,000 or depending on who the person is, a year to offset some of that cost.
Offset the unemployment cost.
So it may not be strict to that formula, but you can't look at just the pure adding up a number of positions.
Right.
You still have to account for benefits.
Right, we just wanted to give people sort of a sense of where the numbers are in terms of salaries. Councilor Labarge asked about the stabilization and free cash and so on. Remember the other night, we talked about we had $1 million in free cash, we had taken out 152 plus for vets benefits and 60 for the capital plan, so we're at 787 approximately. We know we're gonna have a snow and ice transfer of some sort. Last year it was about 350. I hope we can hold it at that. We don't have a total number on that yet. Fire over,
The certified free cash, that was what was certified at the end of FY08.
correct.
So that was,
It came late this year, came back late this year.
Yeah, just got it last month.
okay.
125 we think in fire overtime. We've had a number of people out on pregnancy leave, family leave, and we've also had some fires at night. So a fire at, you know, a fire anytime that is more than a, well, it's more than a single alarm or double alarm, we're gonna have people in. And we're gonna call mutual aid, but we're also calling our own people. Anything that's ambulance related is being paid for out of the ambulance fund. This overtime is purely fire suppression related. Has nothing to do with ambulance, okay? Veterans benefits, we know we're gonna have another transfer there.
It'll happen in March. Steve already contacted me, runs out the end of this
Right,
month.
and we are working on the state level to see whether or not there's some recognition of the burden that communities with a VA hospital have, because if somebody's in our community for one day, they're a veteran for a year, according to the states, the state government that lives in Northampton. Stabilization, we had 847,000, we transferred out 602. Then we, and then we put some interest in, so we have 244,360 in our stabilization account right now. Right? Is that right about that? Yeah. And in the capital reserve account, which remember we were setting aside to help offset some of the burden on the general fund for any large capital projects, we have $1.3 million in there. So between the three accounts, we have 5, we'll have, you know, maybe $1.6 million or so, $1.7 million at the end of this year. We don't have money to support the general fund in any appreciable way, especially if we have to pay unemployment. We're going to have to look at that. I think we're going to have to look at those funds to help us, because we don't want to have to pay unemployment from the ongoing operation budget. I think we want to spend one-time money on that. So that's where we are on the various fund balances for the stabilization and other funds.
Undesignated reserves, what's normally the target that you want to try to keep on? I mean, what do they recommend? What do the DLS or whoever?
Actually, the rating agencies would want you to have 5%.
In various accounts.
5% of your fund balance be undesignated fund balance.
For unanticipated.
Or you could have it in stabilization as well.
You could have it in stabilization. They want you to have about 5%
Cash.
cash, yeah. And we're at a point now where they're starting to get concerned with us. They mentioned it this year when we got our rating from Standard & Poor's.
By the way, we did go in for a rating for Standard & Poor's this year instead of.
I can remember when they only had 2% in that.
Right. I remember a year that we had $25,000 in free cash. So, I don't want to go there, but we went in for a rating at Standard & Poor's this year instead of Moody's, and we got an equivalent rating with Standard & Poor's that we got with Moody, a very
Got an A+.
an A+, right, a very good rating, which is
Same as an A1.
and we've been told by Moody's and others that the only way we get a higher rating than that is if our property values are much higher than they are here. So we're not going up unless we see dramatic increases in property values. Okay, so what are some of these options now? So what about state help, state and federal help? So we know the statewide meal tax might happen. We know the local options might happen, or the hotel motel. I don't think there's going to be any change in our aid numbers. I think those numbers are fixed. In fact, I think they may do an early aid resolution to just get it out of the way. So I don't think we're gonna get any more money on on our local aid. You know, the stimulus money that's coming to the state, there's some education money going to the state, they're gonna use that to supplement those communities that are under foundation, those communities, so I don't think we're gonna get any of that. In fact, we're about, I think 13, well, I think we're about 14% over foundation, but I
The
could be wrong
foundation is
about
what's
that.
required by ed reform.
By ed reform,
It's the
correct.
minimum amount, okay.
Correct. So what are options? Tomorrow I'm going to be passing out a letter that we're going to be telling the non-represented, non-union employees that we're going to be freezing wages for a year. We're soliciting bids for health insurance. We're going to look at further consolidations of city departments and functions to see if we can't reduce that way. We are going to be talking to all of our city unions about how they can help us stave off personnel cuts. We are going to be looking at layoffs in any scenario. There's been a discussion about overrides. I have to say, without significant trimming on our side, I'm not even going to go to the voters to ask for an override. But if we're that we've trimmed everything we possibly can, then I think the voters have a right to vote on whether or not their services are going to be cut anymore. And I'm open to any other ideas. You know, no idea is off the table. Those are some of the local actions we can take, and really, anything else that people think of. I think this might be the end. Yep. Let me go back up. So I think that's where we are. Yeah.
When you say significant trimming, do you have a ballpark figure what that would look like?
Well, assuming nothing changes, the same health insurance number, and we don't get any relief on the pay increases, and, we're going to have to cut $6 million. Oh, you're talking about an override?
Yes.
I would say $3 to $4 million.
For trim.
Yeah.
Right.
I would say we'd have to get at least $3 to $4 million cut. I mean, I'm really cognizant of what people are having happen in their own homes. That people are going through the same kinds of things. So
Very realistic.
and I can't imagine going and asking people to raise their own taxes to pay for our health insurance premium if we haven't done everything we possibly can do to get that number down. For instance, you know, that's kind of what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, but asking is one thing, getting's another.
And right, but you know, again, we are democracy, and people have a right to weigh in on things that affect them. And you know, we've had a lot of discussion in this city about public input and best practices and all kinds of things. But ultimately, the ballot box is the place that everybody can go. Not everybody can come to a meeting. Not everybody can write a blog or what, any of those other things.
The green chart you showed about how 2.5 works is, I mean, that's what we're constrained by.
That's correct.
And the only way to get out of that box is the override.
Is to ask.
Is to ask.
Is to ask, exactly.
Well, the qualified to that is what you said earlier, is that don't even bother going until we show that we've done significant trimming.
Well, right,
I think that's why your preface to the sentence.
correct.
Don't even bother to go
I-
unless you can done.
I think what I said was I can't imagine us going to the voters unless we're going to be able to say that we've made the kind of cuts that are that we can make. And let me tell you what I'm saying to city employees, or I'm saying to everybody that I talk to. This is about jobs at this point. Anybody that we lay off here at city government is going to be another person that's out on the street looking for work in a job market where they're not going to find one. Yeah, not going to find a job. That makes me very concerned. Many of our people are pretty highly trained, and we've invested a lot of money in their training. I'm not particularly interested in wasting that money by laying them off. You know, so this is about jobs. And you know, the president in his inauguration said, look at your coworker. What can you do to help have your coworker keep hours in a job?
And the people that we lay off, their expertise is in public service.
Correct.
And every place they would logically go to be hired in their area of expertise is experiencing the same problems we are. All municipalities in Massachusetts and the state government have the same problem. So the people that we lay off have a pretty grim job market because what they do is where the problem is.
Chelmsford is laying off. New Bedford just laid off a number of I think 60 public safety employees, half in the police and half in the fire department. Walpole is looking at between 26 municipal workers and between 40 and 60 school employees. That's this year. Lynn and Brookline. Lynn is looking at major cuts this year. Chatham, is looking at a pay freeze for next year. So, you know, lots of times people say, well, if Northampton did this or Northampton did that, I'm open to telling me what we've done wrong, but this is a national thing going on here. This is not unique to Northampton. Yeah.
Now, we can say that we're gonna cut employees, but service cuts are what comes behind cutting employees. You start cutting people out of the Department of Public Works that is already at a minimum, and you're cutting service, you're cutting things that will not get done. There will be no chance of it. And the same with police and fire. If we cut police and fire, we're gonna be in a lot of trouble.
Just by the way, we're going to be setting up a website for people. They can go on the website. It'll be set up by tomorrow, the next day. We'll have this slideshow on there and some of the backup documentation. But there are 51 employees in all of general government. There are 146 in all of public safety. The schools altogether have about 550. Public Works has 49 employees that are not in the enterprise fund, and 17 of them are in the streets division. Human Services altogether, Board of Health, Council on Aging, Committee on Disabilities, and Veteran Services, about 7 people. Culture and Recreation, I think this Forbes employee number is wrong. They say they have 23 people, but I'm having a really hard time imagining that. So we're not talking about big numbers here. You know, when you look at the pie chart, it doesn't show you that number. We'll have the backup documentation that shows you those numbers as well. Yeah.
When you mentioned the wage freeze for the non-representative employees, did you mention who that you are, what they?
It's all. It's everybody in my office. It's everybody. It's a number of the some number of department heads. It's all of the people at dispatch, and I met with them. Some of the parking division folks who I have not had a chance to meet with yet.
So it's a limited number.
51. It's 48 people. Because I just signed all the letters. Are there questions from people who are listening? I see one of them who's going to get a letter. Yeah. By the way, I am going around to all of our workplaces as well. I'm going to be doing essentially the same presentation to all our city employees. And I'll be doing, I've been working with you all to set up public meet forums in your wards.
Is this the presentation you're going to?
This is essentially the presentation I'm going to do, but as the numbers change, we'll change the presentation. Yeah.
Do you have, when you say the 3 to 4 million trimming that we need to do you have a notion of where that money is going to come from?
Not yet. Still working on it. I mean, it's got to come from, again, 75% of what we spend is on people, so it's going to have to come from the personnel side of the budget. Is that in layoffs? Is that in any kind of hold on wages, or is it in change in the way we, how we're dealing with health insurance? It could be any of those things. But, you know, it's just, you know, again, everything's on the table. You know, one of the things that I've had a very preliminary talk with David Pomerantz about is streetlights. And I know this is a touchy subject, but it's one of the things that we're going to have to talk about. Very expensive. So.
How about some of the things like plowing?
Plowing is a discussion that the Board of Public Works is
Obviously,
having.
we're about to leave plowing season, hopefully. 22 more days till spring, but but we still have to budget for FY10.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we've done with plowing and we've done it with legal services. Oh, by the way, I think one of the newspapers or one of the tabloids has that we spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal services this year. There's a reason for that. I think it was in the Advocate. So just FYI, we didn't spend hundreds and hundreds. I think we had 450,000 there. But we tend to budget those numbers at a historic number and then make it up. So we make it up out of free cash. So if we change the way we plow, it's going to save us more likely on the free cash side than it will on the appropriation side. Okay? And the same with veteran services, we really should be budgeting $330 in the benefits there, we're at 125, I think.
I'm not saying put a lower number in for snow and ice, I'm saying, do we rethink our philosophy
Right.
about how we plow, and to the extent we plow, and when we plow, and those kinds of things.
I think the Board of Public Works is doing that review right now.
How about I know other communities are looking at going to 4-day weeks and things like that.
We've done
That's something.
We've done a preliminary analysis of the 4-day work week. You can't do it for schools because you're required to stay open 180 days a year. You can't do it for police, you can't do it for fire. You're not gonna do those at 4-day work weeks. So could you do it for DPW? You wouldn't do it for parking because they're revenue producing, they're a 6-day week operation, revenue producing. So you're really down to the 51 people that work in City Hall plus the 40-something people that work at the DPW maybe, so it's 90 of your 800 workers, so it's about 10% of the workers that actually would be able to do it. And it really, and so then the question is, you only save the money if they actually take a day off, you pay them for one less day. Because there's not appreciable savings in the heating, because I asked David Pomerantz to run it. What happens if we shut this campus down for a day? What are utility savings? It wasn't an appreciable amount. So we've looked at it. Mr. Tacey.
The state aid cut, the $530,000 in '09.
Oh, hang on, do you want to talk into the microphone?
No, that's fine. In
I'll repeat the
the 1.5 million. Run that by me again.
The question is, I think the question is, could you re-explain the state aid cut? Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay, so we got cut $530,000 this year,
Mid-year.
mid-year.
Mid-year, yep.
And then they're taking from this year's original amount that we got, next year, they're taking 1.5 million. So they're not taking the 1.5 million from this year minus the 5.
Right.
They're taking it from this year's original number.
Okay.
Okay, does that make sense?
Yep. I had it right,
Okay.
it was confusing 5 minutes ago, okay? I thought I had it right when I first read
Right,
it.
yeah, that's the way it works.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
I think in the paper, you have quoted something to the effect that was that between 80 or 100 people that might be laid off.
well, take the $6 million problem, look at the average salary, divide that average salary into $6 million, and you're pretty darn close to 100 people. If you just do it with layoffs. And the thing was, I said to the paper, and I'm watching him pull his pen out, I said, the question was, how many people would you have to lay off to close that gap? So the answer was, you could be up to 100. But I'm not proposing that we close the gap only with layoffs. So how you ask the question and how you, the question wasn't in the paper, just the answer. Okay? So I think that the solutions are a combination of a number of things, not just layoffs. But I think in any scenario, there's going to be layoffs.
What would be the cost, Mayor, for putting it on the ballot for the override?
Is it 25, is it 30, it's whatever it is. I mean, but again, we don't, I think the people have the right to weigh in on it.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, that's part of democracy.
That's
to have
right.
Rights to vote. I feel myself, because I know it's gonna be very difficult. This
Yeah.
one is gonna be very difficult, and you're right, people have the rights to vote. But have you ever thought about doing a menu override?
Well,
I mean, that way people would have a choice of where they feel they would want their tax dollars to go. Instead of just putting it out as an override, I think you would have a better time at doing a menu override, and some people would say, well, yeah, I want to go ahead, I want to keep the Board of Public Works, I want nothing to happen to public safety, but to just do it all in one, it's going to be very difficult.
I just want to remind the council of their role in any override if we come to that. I don't get to put an override on the ballot. The mayor can't just say, oh, I want an override. It actually has to be voted on by the council.
Right, I
So,
understand that.
so
We've
you
done
all
it
would have to,
before.
yeah, you would all have to vote to put it on the ballot. You would have to take 2 votes, separated by 2 meetings like you usually do. And the city clerk would need then 35 days. She would have to schedule the election 35 days after that, at least 35 days after that. you at that point, that if I ask you to put an override on the ballot, or if you decide that that's something you want to do, you can have the discussion about whether or not you think a menu is more appropriate or a general override is more appropriate. That's a philosophical discussion that you can have.
Because I know once before I brought it up.
I'm not,
Getting override, and you were not in favor.
and I'm
of
still not,
override.
I'm still not in favor, but that doesn't mean that other people may not have an opinion on that. That's my opinion. Yeah,
But with 2 votes, there's a month, and 35 days, there's another month. And FY 2010 starts July 1, and you have to budget once you know whether you're getting extra money or not, and there's
Well, let me-
potentially a month,
let
so
me-
the time is short.
well, let me tell you what we're trying to do. We're budgeting on 2 levels. We're having a meeting tomorrow with department heads where they know what they need to cut, and we're giving them the budget forms and asking them to turn those around to us within, I think, 2 weeks. You know, we're giving them a very short period of time. We, at the same time, are having discussions with health insurance, and some of this has been driven by the health insurance clock and the state clock. So the governor didn't come out with his aid numbers till the 23rd of February. We didn't get our health insurance quote until the beginning of, 23rd of January, I'm sorry. We didn't get a health insurance quote till the beginning of February. So a lot of this stuff kind of flows from when the numbers start to become clear. And we didn't get our free cash certified as well. So a lot of things, we're running a little late. So we're gonna budget as if we're taking the full cut. At the same time, we're gonna be talking about health insurance, we're gonna be talking about, with our labor unions, we're gonna be talking about consolidations and functions, et cetera, all at the same time. And if we all collectively think that we've made the kind of cuts that we need to make, we'll present you two scenarios, I think is what we're gonna end up doing. Our best case cut scenario, and you'll make a decision with me about whether or not that's acceptable. The school department has begun their process as well. They have their first budget and property committee meeting where they're looking at a number of scenarios with the kind of cut that they need to make. And they're gonna be looking at implications for class size, implications for extracurriculars and everything else that's on the table. And again, you know, you open the newspaper and every school district is going through this in some way, shape or form. Amherst is going through a very similar process. And we're early. I have to say, we're earlier than we usually are. We're sometimes later than this, so we tried to start the public discussion much earlier this time.
Mayor, when would this go on ballot?
If there was an override, I think at this point, the earliest, if you were to do one, would be in mid to late May. And that's late because of teacher layoffs, et cetera, but I think that's the best we're going to be able to do.
Can I just ask you one thing, please?
You can ask me as many questions as you want.
Wendy's department, because we all know that there's a problem in that department. Where is she gonna get the help to do this election?
It's the same with every department. Where's DPW gonna get the help to do what they need to do? We've talked to the city clerk, she had a vacancy. After we got the $530,000 cut, we said to departments, we're gonna be careful about every hiring. And we said that she could hire her assistant. If there was a vacant clerk position, we weren't gonna fill that. We hired an assistant treasurer because you couldn't have just one, you can't have just a treasurer, right? Okay? There are some other positions, we haven't had that many vacancies come up. But we have said to the city clerk, because that vacancy exists, she does not have to do a 12% cut to her department. That is part of her 12% cut. So when she's looking at her cuts, she's done, or pretty close to done.
So that one position that we have been hearing that has not been filled for over a year because that person moved into the Register of Voters office. So that seat is still available.
No. A position came open in July 1st. A position came open in July 1st because of a retirement. Lynn Nuttleman took that position.
Ours went into the Register of Voters.
But that was an arrangement that happened quite a while ago. We did tell the city clerk that she no longer has to do passports if she doesn't want to do them because that's what requires the segregation of duties. Okay? All of those people can work everywhere if they don't do passports. And we're not too many people are going to Europe. I think it's okay to not do passports.
They're not going too far.
That's right. So, but again, I mean, I really am sympathetic with the city clerk. She has a really hard time getting all her work done. It's going to be the same in every other department. think about that cut magnified in every other department. That's what it's gonna be like.
Is the passport, that's a revenue stream, is it not?
It's only about $10,000 a year.
I mean, it's $10,000 a year that is not, we can't guarantee we're even gonna get it in the upcoming year, and it creates a real hardship in terms of doing the work in that office. Because if you do passports, you're not allowed to work on some other things. So,
And we also have 2 full passport centers,
which we
East Hampton and Northampton.
which we didn't have when we first started doing passports. We didn't have that. I mean, those exist now. And we're not the #1 choice anymore for people who are getting a passport. So we need to really look at that. Yeah.
But with the timetable of not having a potential vote on override until May, that puts us in a position where we have to pink slip a bunch of people
Correct.
prior to that election, so.
But we have
it's
to- I
an
mean-
unfortunate circumstance,
So,
so,
you know, right. I mean,
yeah,
it's the way it is.
it's the way it is, but so people will get notices that.
We need to do it
will be
with
on
enough
the
time to
edge.
give people 30 days notice, is really where it is. Teachers have a whole different rule under law. But, and I will say, by the way, if the clerk needs money to have overtime for, we're gonna have to transfer money in to help her out. That's what we'll have to do.
In terms of the timing, when do you think, I mean, some of these numbers like the stimulus package, have they given us any indication when?
We were hoping to hear by the end of this week on the education part of the stimulus package. We've heard a little bit on the COPS money. We hope to hear a little bit more in the next couple of weeks. That's why, even if we wanted to do something earlier, I don't think we have enough information.
That's the problem.
We just don't have enough information, yeah.
To extend what he said just a little bit further with the stimulus package, I know that we put in some shovel-ready jobs into that. Are we hearing anything on those?
No, we aren't, and I know that we're gonna get money to do the Safe Routes to School at Jackson Street, which we put in for right around the same time, and that one is being funded through the local MPO process, so that's sidewalks and bike connector and so on. That one I think is gonna go. We put in for a whole bunch of other stuff that I think very few of them will be funded. My #1 priority was the police station, and I doubt that that's going to be funded. We're going to have a presentation for finance and for the city council on the question of whether or not we can go ahead with the police station. We're waiting to look at what the bids are, and then we'll have a conversation about that. But so I don't want to go into great depth about that. We're going to have a very in-depth discussion about the financing for the police station. It ties back to the slides that I showed you about debt, and we'll do that. Yeah.
What hotel you had in back here, is that in the?
No, he's still looking for financing, but he's having the same problem. You know, the banks aren't lending anybody money, and he's one of the people that
Money.
hold up his money. He's ready to go. He's got his architecture drawings. Any of the concerns have been settled. He is ready to go, except that he needs to find financing. And it's like a lot of other projects out there that the banks are just not lending. What the president said last night is absolutely true. You know, they got all this money and they're not giving it out. That's a perfect shovel-ready project that would be ready to go and would employ people in this city, construction workers, electricians, plumbers, and the same thing's true for the police station. We could be employing people there for 2 years. And it's a tragedy that may be a problem. Are there any other questions? Is this,
One
Mr.
more,
Tacey. Sure.
The bid is a bone of contention with me. Do we
I'm
know exactly-
shocked.
Do we know exactly how much that is going to cost the city of
Yes,
Northampton?
I do.
Exactly.
Yes, I do. It's gonna cost us the money for the trash pickup that we currently pay. We're gonna transfer that money to them. That money currently comes out of parking. In addition, we are going to buy a sidewalk sweeper out of parking revenues. That's it. We were gonna buy that sidewalk sweeper a couple of years ago anyway, because it would be very helpful with the garage and the lots. That's it. That's our cash contribution. That's it.
What about the $35,000?
That is the $35,000.
The $35,000
It's the
is the
trash
money for
pickup.
the trash pickup.
Correct.
But it's listed as two separate items in the,
There's $35,000, that's the trash pickup, and then there's $35,000 that is the street sweeper. They're about the same amount of money.
Okay, so then when it
But
says.
that's
you-
a one-time cost, and then if you notice in there, it says they can come back to us and negotiate on other capital items that we can, on a yearly basis, we can have a conversation with them about it.
Okay, so funding the bid with $35,000 is the initial investment,
Plus the street sweeper,
plus the street sweeper,
sidewalk sweeper,
sidewalk sweeper,
right?
so let's say 70,000. And then also, the trash is also listed in there,
No.
in the
the
memorandum of
trash is-
understanding.
Yeah, I understand that, but the trash is that money. The trash is part of the 70. And I'll explain that at the next meeting.
See, it's the language.
Yeah. Just reviewed it with them.
Okay.
I just reviewed it with them.
And
And,
I just had a problem with the wording of it.
no, I think you're right. I think the wording's a little confusing, but that is the commitment that we've made.
And then the commitment, it says, commit to provide 2 police officers, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
And we already have, that's our staffing goal now.
But we don't provide them.
If we have them, we do, but we're understaffed.
So would we enter into that agreement?
Yeah, they know that if it's in it, and it's reflected in there. If we need them in another part of the city, because we're understaffed, we can pull them. It says it right in the language.
I read that.
Yeah,
But it,
I want one too.
you're on my list.
Huh?
You're on my list. That I was really clear with them, that we would make the commitment at full staffing. But if we need them in another part of the city, that we're gonna pull them if we're understaffed.
okay, but I know we all realize that we have 4 cruisers on.
I
One
wish you
man
wouldn't
each
say that on
cruiser.
TV because the criminals are watching.
Yeah, well, we
Oh,
don't-
nobody can hear you anyway because you didn't wanna use the mic.
That's right. We have 4 cruisers now with 1 guy in each cruiser for the city. And we have 1 desk person at the
Which is
police
one of the
station.
2.
And we have 1 walking a beat.
Right. We have a downtown cruiser.
Yep.
And we have 1 walking the beat. That's 2.
Okay, then we should, then before we take our next vote, we should probably change that language because it says 2 people on foot.
No, I don't
Or
believe
a
it says,
bicycle.
I don't believe it says,
Absolutely does.
well, it says downtown. If it says 1 foot and on a bicycle, I don't think, the understanding is it's the staffing that we currently have. You know, you can quibble on the details, but there's no expectation that we're gonna add police officers, and quite frankly, nobody can compel me to do that except, and not even these guys. So, I don't believe we're gonna get sued about it or anything else. And, you know, I think it's a tempest in the teapot. And I'm happy to have a further conversation with you. As you know, my door is always open to have that conversation. But we're talking about the current staffing, and I believe you talked to the police chief and he told you the same thing.
I talked to the police chief.
And he
yes,
told
he
you
did.
the same thing, didn't he?
Yep.
Okay,
But I've read it 10 times,
I
and
know.
that's not what it says.
Well, you and I are gonna have to agree to disagree on that.
We will discuss it.
Any further questions on this?
How much is still holding? One night maybe we drove to have a
Right.
police
When we
officer,
get-
still.
That's on the
you're not
list.
gonna Cut it
No?
before I get it.
Okay. I'm doing my best,
Okay.
okay?
that's all
Any
I
other
have.
questions or comments? Again, I hope to have this website up by tomorrow, and I'm hoping this won't be televised till after that, so that we can, but we'll put this on there and a few of the backup sheets, and hopefully people can send me emails if they have any thoughts, yeah.
I'd just like to make one comment, and I reviewed the memorandum of understanding again yesterday, read through it.
Right, I'm getting a little uncomfortable because the bid is not on the agenda tonight, so I'm not comfortable
I'll do
having
it
this.
at the city
Yeah, I
council.
mean, we had a question that directly related to the budget, I'm okay with that, but, okay? Is there any other discussion? Any new items? A motion to adjourn would be in order?
So
For a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thanks.